Lesson A3, Social Science Research. Now that we have a good idea of some of the big theories sociologists have come up with to explain society, we need to understand how social scientists come up with their theories. The research that gives evidence for why something is true about society. Because a theory without researched facts is just philosophy. We all feel like we know something about our social world. Maybe you have your own hypotheses about why people act the way they do, or how some types of people are different than others. But how do we know that our ideas are valid, that they actually tell us something true? The problem with basing our ideas on everyday experience is that our personal perspectives are limited to a small sample of society. Of about 7 billion people in the world today, how many have you actually interacted with? How many do you know well? How many people's heads have you been in to see through their eyes? Our own understanding is based on the culture in which we were raised, and we tend to remember that which confirms our beliefs while ignoring anything that challenges them. Prejudgments about people, also known as prejudice, leads to stereotypes, assumptions about whole groups of people. Are all men muscular and brave, our traditional idea of masculine? Are all women small and timid, living by their maternal instincts, our traditional idea of feminine? Simple observations of the people around us can give evidence against such stereotypes. You or someone you know probably doesn't feel like a traditional man or woman in every way. Yet observations can also confirm some stereotypes, as we see boys and girls who do seem to fulfill these roles. With such limited experience and such a variety of people, can we say anything for sure? Our best bet is to use the scientific method, to gather data about the world with reliable methods that others can repeat, and analyze our evidence from what it is, not what we want it to be. To make theories about the way things work based on that evidence, and encourage ourselves and others to question research further. Emil Durkheim is considered another key founder of sociology. He said that sociologists have to study social facts that can be directly observed and recorded in a way that other researchers can verify. So if we wanted to know about common differences between men and women, we might look at the things they buy, how often they get arrested, and other specific behaviors. We cannot study the souls of men and women because those aren't observable. They're abstract. What you see or believe about their divine purpose might be completely different from what I believe, and there is no way that we can prove one another right or wrong. So to gather data with a scientific method, we go through some basic steps. We ask a question about our world. We look at what we already know from previous research. We make an educated guess, our hypothesis, and then we actually go out and do the research, which involves coming up with a method, gathering data, and then analyzing that data to develop a conclusion. Perhaps a new theory, or perhaps proving or disproving an older theory. Often these steps circle back on themselves as we discover something that changes our earlier ideas. Durkheim asked a dark and meaningful question in his famous study of suicide. He looked at the data available and saw that people in some countries seemed to take their own lives more often than in others. So he came up with an initial idea, maybe something like, it's caused by the depression of poverty. But then he went out and did research, gathering data from funeral homes and police records, and discovered that members of certain groups committed suicide more often than others. He analyzed his findings and found that the highest rates were among soldiers who had been pulled from their homes, unmarried people who lived alone, atheists and Protestants who lacked a strong Catholic Church community. And he found that it wasn't poor people who needed each other's help killing themselves, but wealthy people who could afford to be self-sufficient. He concluded that the biggest variable causing suicide was social isolation, just being alone. This supported his belief in functionalism, that structures such as families, churches, and neighborhoods served crucial functions for society by meeting the needs of individuals. But researching people and figuring out what they do isn't always easy. Natural science studies objects. Two identical balls will always fall at the same rate in the same location. That which you can't see with your own eyes can be recorded with other kinds of instruments. But people don't merely respond to gravity. If you shove someone, you can't guarantee what's going to happen. They make decisions based on what's going on inside their heads, which we can't see, and we've yet to find any way to scientifically record inner thoughts. Not only are their processes hidden, but no two people are the same. Every individual is unique. We can make some reliable predictions given enough information, but there are always exceptions. And these unique individuals also make their decisions and interactions with others in a myriad of different ways across the globe. Lastly, what we observe and record is always in danger of being distorted by bias. Those cultural values, assumptions, prejudices, and limitations that cloud our everyday observations can throw off social research as well. Bias is like wearing sunglasses while trying to determine how bright a candle is. It pushes you toward a conclusion that isn't reliable or valid. Through awareness of our own and others' biased views and careful data gathering, we try for objectivity, seeing the facts as if we were an object, like a camera, just recording what there is, regardless of our own beliefs. Weber said we needed to practice value neutrality by putting aside our own values of what's right and wrong, important or not. Since it's difficult to avoid seeing through our own cultural lens, however, we should balance our view using verstehen to understand others' actions from their own perspective. By understanding many different points of view, we can put the puzzle pieces together to form a more objective view. We learn about people in many different ways, but a few of the most common big methods are detailed observation in the form of ethnography, secondary analysis of research that's already available, asking people about their own lives and beliefs through surveys, and putting people in artificial scenarios to experiment on what happens in specific situations. These different methods generally give different kinds of data, little bits of information. Questionnaire surveys and secondary analysis often give us good quantitative data, hard numbers, quantities, that we can compare mathematically. Ethnographic observation and interview surveys tend to give more qualitative data, useful information that can't be reduced to simple numbers like the tone of someone's voice or the subtle nature of an interaction between parent and child. Regardless of method, you generally can't study every individual. If the population you're interested in is the women of the United States, that's over 150 million people. But you don't have to eat the whole cake to know what it tastes like. You take a smaller sample of the population and base your conclusions of the whole on that. Now, if you just tasted the frosting, you'd get a very biased idea of what the cake tasted like. So you need to carefully slice off a representative sample that gives an accurate depiction of the whole. To give reliable data, you need a big enough sample size with a diverse random selection so that when someone else takes a new sample, they'll get similar results. Sampling errors are some of the most common problems that can bias a study. They can sometimes be caused by confirmation bias, an unconscious habit we all have of placing greater importance on those examples that confirm our view. Or selection bias, a more general issue when doing research of picking biased sources of information. Such errors can lead to overgeneralization, or wrongly assuming your sample is more reliable to a larger population than it is. And finally, we have to be aware of the Hawthorne effect, the tendency of people to act differently when they know they're being studied.